Have we got Heather? We got her back. Oh, great. Heather MacDonald. Listen, I cannot say enough good things about Heather MacDonald. She is my colleague over at City Journal. She is one of the best reporters in the country. I always flatter you when I see you, Heather, but it's all true. The Thomas W. Smith Fellow at the Manhattan Institute, a contributor and editor of City Journal. She is also the New York Times best-selling author, and her latest book is The Diversity Delusion, which comes out officially September 4th. I'm sure you can pre-order now. How race and gender pandering corrupt the university and undermine our culture. As usual, Heather, you are reticent and shy about your opinions, but it's wonderful to see you. How are you? It's always a pleasure. Let us talk about this. This is basically, you're talking about the gender and race business. So we're talking about, let's start with race. What does this mean? Why you start out by saying affirmative action is a disaster? Why is affirmative action a disaster?
Well, it harms its alleged beneficiaries. We've been having I think by now, sterile debate for the last 40 years about its constitutional validity under, these very arcane standards of review. The real problem with affirmative action, as far as I'm concerned, goes beyond reverse racism. It's the fact that you are bringing people into academic environments for which they are not prepared, and you're setting them up to fail. Let's take it out of the race context. Let's take it as a gender example. Let's say I have 650 math SATs, but MIT decides it needs to have more females so it can look out over its diverse realm, and they admit me. And all of my peers were admitted on merit, not on the ridiculous fact of what's between their legs. And they have 800s on their math SATs. What's going to happen to me my first year? I'm going to bomb out because I'm not going to be able to keep up with freshman calculus or advanced calculus. And even if I'd come in wanting to be an engineer, I'm going to look around and say, I can't hack it. And I'll probably end up in women's studies if I stay at MIT at all. Because the classes will be pitched for the average capacity of the students, not to me. With my 650 math SATs, if I'd gone instead of MIT to maybe Boston College, which is a perfectly respectable school, and my peers all had 600, 650s on math, I'd keep up, and I would probably persist in my intention to become an engineer. The same thing happens with blacks, and even more tragically. It turns out, according to one study at Duke, that a larger percentage of black male freshmen want to major in a science field when they come in as freshmen than white males. About 70% of the black males admitted to Duke intend to be an engineer or a physicist. What happens to them? They all change majors. They can't hack it. So we end up with fewer black scientists than we would have otherwise had they been admitted to University of North Carolina. So it's a oppressive and sadistic policy on the part of these preening admissions directors and college presidents that want to feel noblesse oblige when they look out over their diverse realm to admit students who are patently not going to be able to keep up.
Does that also infect setting aside affirmative action specifically, but the notion that race is the all important definition of humanity, does that infect the culture of the university altogether? I mean, does it lessen our education system altogether?
Well, absolutely. But what I will tell you, the dirty secret of these protests that we've been having over the last couple years, the Black Lives Matter protests on campus, the die-ins, the, oh, we're dying cries from Yale students or Princeton black students saying, we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, the maudlin statement of the century when it comes out of a black Princeton student's mouth. The reason that race becomes this main issue and the students go around claiming that they're victims of microaggressions or explicit racism is precisely because of racial preferences, what's known as mismatch. They're brought into these schools, they can't keep up. They have two options. They can say, I was admitted as a quota, or they could say, I'm in an an oppressive environment. And the reason I'm not feeling comfortable in my chemistry class is because the teacher is using a racist, patriarchal teaching method, like expecting me to learn facts. So the racial preferences are driving a lot of this, but certainly, I mean, it's part of this whole just poisonous identity politics, which starts on campus and then is bleeding very fast into the world at large. We're seeing the science fields within universities being infected by gender and race quotas, and in tech companies, in corporations across the country, meritocracy is being thrown overboard at a really alarming rate in favor of racial and gender diversity, which means lowering hiring
So
standards.
yeah, all the standards go down. Talking about your new book, The Diversity Delusion: How Race and Gender Pandering Corrupt the University and Undermine Our Culture. Always great writing, great reporting from Heather MacDonald. Let's talk about something that always really bothers me: this idea that of microaggressions. Put these two together: microaggressions and subconscious racism. Is that even a thing? Are those real things?
No, they're not. I mean, it's basically an implicit acknowledgement that we have done very well when it comes to purging this country's truly deplorable past. It becomes harder and harder to find explicit actual racism. The reality in every institution that's in the mainstream today, and any large institution, is precisely the opposite. You cannot find a single institution today, whether it's a university, a corporation, a bank, a nonprofit, media, Hollywood, publishing, that is not exercising preferences in favor of minorities and against whites. I would hate to be a white male today. I may be white, which is a count against me, but I'm a female. So sadly, I've been the so-called beneficiary of gender quotas throughout my life, which nauseates me. But the microaggression conceit, which is, let's look at some of the classic microaggressions. There was a period 2 years ago where model and self-pitying students would put together these little videos with whiteboards, and they would list behind them the microaggressions that they've been subjected to. It was really sad. And one of them was, you're like in your freshman mixer and somebody comes up to you and says, "So, like, what are you?" And this is a microaggression. Well, let's put this in context. We live in a world where we're told that the most important thing about somebody is his race and ethnic
Right.
identity. And so this is a sort of a clumsy way of asking, okay, so you're Samoan, Laotian, Cherokee, what are you? Now, rather than getting all hot under the collar about this and running to your dean and demanding a new diversity sinecure, a new diversity vice provost, how about just saying, well, I'm Laotian, Samoan, and half Cherokee. What are you? Uh, but that's what students are now running to their deans about in tears and saying they need protection from. I would say that the responsibility of those adults on campus is to teach students to distinguish between a real problem and a fake problem. And microaggressions are a fake problem that should not stand in the way of their getting the best education they can.
On the side of gender, you have a story in here about Columbia. I think it was called the Sexual Respect Initiative. Is that what?
Oh,
Could you explain what that is?
well, you know, this means, as a graduate student studying a actually important subject for once that unfortunately he won't allow me to even
Mm.
reveal because he's so worried. He said we can now no longer have freedom of conscience. The Sexual Respect Initiative was a mandate for every graduate student and every undergraduate student in order to graduate. They had to go through these ridiculous re-education options, like they could attend a healing therapy aromatherapy session for campus rape survivors, or they could watch a video on toxic masculinity, or they could attend a feminist play of, how awful it is to be a female at Columbia today. And they all embraced all of these options for learning sexual respect, embraced a particular view of sex on campus, which is the more the better, unless you have regrets, in which case you've been raped. And this student, this graduate student, who again is studying something that we should all be grateful that he's studying because it preserves the heritage of Western civilization, happens to be a religious conservative. And he does not believe that uh, endless, promiscuous premarital sex is the best thing for students to be engaged in. But there were no options, there were no sexual respect options for him
Mhm.
that might have said, well, one way to respect your boyfriend or girlfriend is to be abstinent until marriage. And so, what this really was forcing a particular type of uh, politicized sexual agenda on every single Columbia student.
What always gets me about this is it seems to reduce women to the state of hysterical Victorians. I mean, you even use the word the fainting couch in one of your essays. Are girls on campus being raped at an incredible rate or something, or is that ridiculous?
It's completely ridiculous. Can we put this in context, Andrew? So, what's the claim that the Obama administration used endlessly? Joe Biden, the Title IX,
Right.
due process, evisceration. It's 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 uh, college women, we're supposed to say, I would prefer girls, are going to be sexually assaulted during their campus experience. Well, a 1 in 4, 1 in 5 violent crime rate, even over 4 years, is beyond anything that we know of in human society. It's beyond the worst African civil wars. Detroit, our most violent city, has a 2% violent crime rate for all 4 violent felonies. That's murder, rape, aggravated assault, and robbery. If this was the case, if we were living through a sexual violence epidemic of that proportion, you would have seen a mad rush to create single-sex schools decades ago. Highly educated mothers, no longer baby boomers now. What are they, millennials or Generation X? I don't know, but they're younger than baby boomers, meaning they have been even more brainwashed by feminism. They are sending their pre-kindergartners daughters to $250 an hour tutoring to get them into the most elite uh, kindergarten in New York City in order to make sure that they go to Harvard and Yale and Stanford 16 years later. Apparently sending their daughters into a rape scene of climactic proportions with eagerness and intensity, competitive fervor. The story does not add
So
up.
an impressive reaction to a crisis that doesn't even exist, which is kind of
Right.
almost the definition of leftism. I'm running out of time. Let me ask you, when you look at all this, I mean, you're so steeped in this, uh, do you despair or do you see the culture turning around at any point? What do you see in the future?
Well, I'll be perfectly honest. I know I'm not supposed to say this. I'm pretty much in despair, but I do think that what we need to do above all is to hit back against the primary fallacy underlying all of this, and it's behind the campus free speech crisis as well, is the idea that America is fundamentally racist and sexist. And you, Andrew, have been one of the most important voices out there
Oh,
to dispute that lie. As long as that lie holds and campuses are its guardian, we're going to have this assault on the Western tradition and civilization and humanities. We have to return colleges to their core mission, which is passing on the inheritance, our precious inheritance to students. We have to say we're not a racist and sexist culture. Alumni have to stop funneling billions into their alma maters until they do due diligence and make sure that they're not involved in identity politics. And in the meantime, parents just have to be very careful with what their students are studying and make sure that educate them before they get to college and the importance of learning great books, great literature, and great philosophy.
Heather MacDonald, you're one of my heroes. As you know, The Diversity Delusion is the new book. You're always so nice when I talk to you, and then you go out in the street and you're like this tough guy reporter. I'm not sure which is the real you. But anyway, it's great to see you. I hope I get to see you again soon.
Me too, Andrew. Thank you so much.
She's the best. She really is a great reporter. You get the book, The Diversity Delusion. Also read her in City Journal, where she writes continually, and she is always on top of things and never minces words. It's true when I talk to her. She's always so sweet and nice, and then she goes out and she just tears into people on the street.